Welcome to Internet Safety, hosted by Donna Rice Hughes. Over the next hour, you'll learn practical and crucial tips on how to keep your loved ones safe in the digital world. Now, here is Donna.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Internet Safety. I am your host, Donna Rice Hughes, and we have a really wonderful program lined up for you with a mental health expert. His name is Renz DeKoning, and the topic of our show today is digital addictions, safeguarding young minds in the age of online sexual exploitation. Renz is the executive director of Genesis Family Foundation, a biblically based mental health organization. He started his career in the Netherlands as an Air Force officer in charge of the leadership and coaching there. He attended Texas State University and the Gottman Institute to get his U.S. credentials in the world of mental health. He now specializes in marriage counseling as well as sex and pornography addiction. Renz,
Thank you, Donna. Thank you for having me.
so tell us about your work.
Yeah, so my wife and I, we started this organization, Genesis Family, with the main focus of really providing biblically based counseling and therapy services. My wife is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I focus on substance abuse addictions as well as marriage counseling and, like you said, sex and pornography addictions.
Thank you. You know what? I'm so glad I asked that question because when we first met several months ago, I have to tell everybody this. I know it's an aside, but we were at a breakfast luncheon or a breakfast brunch, I should say, with about 10 people sitting around this big table. Renz, you were on the other side of me, and we found out we were in the same line of work. And I think we completely monopolized that whole conversation. It was so
We
great.
we ruined every other topic at that table. It was just about
But we all learned a lot, and everyone there learned a lot, and that's when I decided I have got to have Renz on our show. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to share a few stats here to begin with. 43% of kids aged 8 through 12 own a smartphone. 88% aged 13 through 18 have a smartphone, and 1 in 6 tweens and teens have a virtual reality headset in the home. Now, I've been doing this, friends, for 30 years now, and I always say to parents, I'm going to hold up my phone, teach your kids this is a tool, not a toy. What concerns you, and what are you seeing in your practice about all these kids that are digitally connected at such a young age?
Yeah, absolutely. We see the age of kids come in with a porn addiction with younger and younger ages. The youngest I've ever treated right now was, I believe, 8 years old. And that's not just a child who has watched porn or twice, but it has escalated to the point that they need professional mental health services in order to recover from an actual diagnosable addiction. And so that's a big problem. Apart from that, from just the age getting younger and younger, one of the things we're seeing is that the amount of pornographic images that are being shared, that are being watched, is of course going up, where in the old days you would have porn magazines, or you would have videos that you would have to go out of your way to buy or to get in one way or another, and then take home and then watch that. And now, obviously, with the internet, but not just internet, also just the smartphones, like you were saying, the immediate accessibility. And we're telling young minds, you need to have, or you can have, unlimited access to everything at any time that you want. And this is causing young kids now, recent studies are showing that they can watch 60 to 80,000 pornographic images per year on average, which is just a mind-blowing statistic in that sense on how much this is and how excessive this is. And so if you watch something so much, it doesn't have to go too far until our brain is wired to just kind of want to watch porn and need to watch porn, which then from a curiosity now turns into a serious addiction.
You're so right. And another thing that is really important for parents to understand, and really anyone listening, is that the type of pornography that kids were exposed to pre-internet, maybe the worst was a Playboy or a Penthouse. Once everything went online, and this is when we began in 1994, we saw the hardest of hardcore material surfacing on the young infant internet, and it's only gotten worse. Those places were more in the dark corners. Now, hardcore, explicit, violent pornography is the mainstream. Topics and themes like teen rape, incest, choking, and violence. So this type of content, at the rate of what you're talking about, having being virtually available 24/7 through a smartphone, unless the parents take the time, like we're going to talk about later, to make sure that these devices are actually safe, and some of the stuff is filtered. This content is actually shaping the sexual template of these kids, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I'm actually very glad you pointed out even the type of porn or the type of material that is being watched, because there's actually a direct relation between the amount of porn being watched and the type of porn being watched. And the reason for that is basically how our brains are wired. When you think of, for example, alcoholism, which I think society has a lot more knowledge on, you know that someone constantly needs to drink more or needs to drink a harder type of, stronger type of alcohol in order to kind of get the same buzz, right? And that's what turns an alcoholic into like a severe alcoholic, because they constantly need just a little more in order to get that same type of buzz. With porn, that is sort of the same, where the more porn someone watches, um, the kind of the harder type of material you need for your brain to kind of see this as something new, as something that it has not seen or experienced before. And so even though it starts with something soft porn, any brain, including a child's brain, will continue to kind of escalate into some of the very much harder topics of porn that you were mentioning, listing just now. And so it really shows kind of how advanced an addiction in that sense can already take place by some of the content kids are watching at that point in time.
And it also shows, Rens, right, that how clever pornographers are at marketing their content, because on any of these porn sites, they will just continually scroll up new variations, new fetishes, to take anyone, not just a child, not just a teenager, but an adult, down into these more extreme types of content that they then get used to and get aroused by, and then need more and more and more. In fact, a sex offender that I interviewed for one of our shows, he's a convicted sex offender in jail, and I went into the jail and actually talked to him, and he actually started with adult pornography, and then he said that that led to homosexual pornography, that led to child pornography, that led to him acting out and building and grooming kids online. So it was all part of this downward spiral for him. Do you see this in your practice, or that kind of thing?
Absolutely, I do. Yes, even with the youngest ones, what we experience here at our practice are stories where young kids are even explaining that even though their parents had really strict rules in terms of smartphones and internet access, that still in the bathroom at school, kids would talk about this kind of stuff, and they would be informed about, for example, gay sex or these other things, which then would spike a certain curiosity. And because these are topics that are not generally discussed around the dinner table, all the information they hear is from other kids who have already been exposed to this kind of content, and that curiosity then leads them to those kind of websites of pornographers or other people. And I hear those stories all the time of that's a way that these kids are exposed to this kind of stuff.
Well, it's really, really scary out there for the kids, and certainly parents trying to help navigate these kinds of things. Let's talk about predators and how they're using this technology and just the whole sex addiction side of that, and how all this, because we're going to start to build this whole idea of the cycle of abuse and how it all relates together.
Yeah. So one of the things that I always tell people, both on the predator side as well as on the victim side, is that often the best way to describe these kinds of processes of how these things come about is to understand the concept that pain causes pain that causes pain that causes pain. And so what you see is that a child or young adult is exposed to this kind of stuff, and they see getting off of this kind of stuff, this kind of material, as a way of managing their stress or managing their guilt and shame cycles. And because of that, they feel a need to watch more and more content. But there, of course, just like with any kind of drug, there is a point in time where that's not enough either. And that's where stuff that you do online can now switch and pivot to the need to actually do this in real life. And that's where, if this person has escalated to watching porn with pedophilia or those kinds of tendencies, or kids having sex or that kind of stuff, all of a sudden this now can turn predatorial. And so this gradually grows, and it usually grows with predators in that situation first watching that kind of stuff. And like I said, eventually that's not going to be enough anymore, and they actually would want to act on it. And so you have that process in place that really causes that. On the victim side, it's kind of in a similar way where you're just hanging around on social media, or you're hanging around on different apps or chats, and you may not have been looking for any of this content at all. But if these people are now out there trying to seek you, that's the way that you can be introduced to this kind of stuff. And especially if you don't have any frame of reference of what is normal and what is not normal, then the predator's interpretation of sex is going to be the thing that you know, and that's what you'll be exposed to. And you'll find that normal, even though it very much is not.
Well, exactly, and that's all part of the grooming process. And we know that where kids are playing, predators are preying on kids. And um, one of the things that we've known for so long is that pornography has always been a grooming tool of a predator, of a child abuser, and of traffickers too, because they use this content to normalize sex, to actually sexualize the child, and to lower their inhibitions, right? To then get them engaged in this whole grooming process that also then takes this downward spiral to where it is now, and can lead to anything from actual face-to-face child sexual abuse to trafficking to sextortion or any of these other areas.
Yes.
I want to hop over to social media. When we were talking, I said, friends, but now we've got the social media thing, right? Where you've got everything kind of is opened up. You've got content, you've got chat, you've got the ability to upload and download and share and everything. And now you've got these big social media platforms that are intentionally programming their algorithms to spin up content that is harmful in some instances and dangerous, that the child might not even be looking for. And you said something to me that I love this, and I want you to talk about this. You said in social media, it just links to everything.
Yes. So one of the things to understand is that social media has a huge, huge impact on mental health in every single way. The youngest generations now are beating every single record when it comes to loneliness, which can lead to depression, which can lead to anxiety, which can lead to a whole array of mental health issues. And so how many likes you get, how you are portrayed online, what kind of pictures I like, how obsessed kids can be with how many pictures or videos they can post. And a lot of parents who are just okaying that or who are agreeing with that, because they're saying, well, these are skills that my kids are learning. They're learning how to do videography and they're learning photography. And I think that those are completely healthy hobbies. But if you look at those kind of hobbies in the old days, you would perhaps print and develop those pictures and put them in a book, and you'd be proud of your artwork of whatever you photographed. But what we're, I think, not fully understanding yet is that when you post it online, everything is about the engagement, everything is about the likes, and about the yeah, basically the approval of the people around you. And that becomes the main theme then. And that is quite an unhealthy thing to teach a child, that whatever they enjoy is something that should be approved by others. And so you see that this has massive mental health repercussions, where I personally, we tell all of our parents in our clinic that if your child is a minor, I respectfully, from a mental health perspective, think that your child actually has no business being on social media.
Well, and you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, the social media companies, they do recognize and they do have terms of service to say if you're under 13, they're not supposed to be given the ability to have a social media account like Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or any of them. The problem is, Renz, and we try to drill this into not only the big tech companies but parents as well, is that any kid can lie about their age. So what we're working on at Enough is Enough with so many of our partners that are in the internet safety space is to get these companies to put in age verification technologies. These technologies exist, so they can technologically keep kids out, but they're not doing it. And that is a problem on so many levels.
Yeah, and I would argue as well that 13 is way too young.
Oh, I
Uh,
agree.
if you
Totally.
realize that social media, particularly, and there's different studies on this, but some of them cite being roughly somewhere between 10 to even 20, some studies even say 25 times more addictive than alcohol. When you are telling your 15-year-old, hey, whenever you feel down, just go on social media and just get a bunch of likes. It's the equivalent of saying, hey, when you're 15 years old and you feel down, right in the corner of this room is the liquor cabinet. Please help yourself.
You're so right about this. And another thing that a lot of people that may not have been around as long as I have is that when social media first came out, there were two companies. There was Facebook and MySpace, and we actually were working very closely with MySpace. We thought that was going to be the big one that took off. But the age there was 17 and older because these social media platforms were designed for college age students to network and to connect. And so we saw a move with Instagram, and in many of them, they kind of went down to 13 because that's the age of quote unquote privacy based on the Child Online Protection Privacy Protection Act that has to deal with advertising. So they went to 13, and just a few years ago, Mark Zuckerberg wanted to start Instagram for kids, and we did a huge petition. We went, no, 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 no. You can't even protect teens on your social media sites. And now you want to go legally to tweens and to, 7, 8, 9, and 10 years old? I don't think so. The attorney generals, the state attorneys general of the United States put up a big ruckus and everything, and so they backed off, thankfully, and hopefully they won't do that again. But I'm going to pop over real quick to online gaming. And when we talked, Renz, you talked about the stress relief. You just alluded to that with social media, and I'm sure it's the same with pornography, right? What are you seeing in the world of online gaming?
Yeah, so those are two questions at the same time, but I'll
Yeah,
do my best to answer them.
you can take them to
So
it one at a time. It's good. One at a time.
When it comes to stress and stress management, we have to understand some of the basic systems of addiction. And the most simple way I can explain this, even though there's a lot more to this, is that you can divide an addiction into three parts. One is the stress. The second one is a stress coping mechanism. And then the third is the guilt and shame. And so what you see is people have stress because of all kinds of things. It starts already young at school. Someone has a test or is being bullied at school. Something happens that is causing someone undue stress. Or sometimes even boredom can be a type of stress that you just feel restless. You don't know what you want to do and you feel so bored. So you're kind of reverting back to something that's going to solve you of this stress. And that's what we call the stress coping mechanism. That can be excessive gaming, that can be porn, that can be even addictive substances. Things like that, that give you a dopamine hit, that give you a release of dopamine, or sometimes even other types of hormones. And it gives that release and it helps you kind of relax. When that stress coping mechanism is something that is unhealthy, very often we kind of feel a sense of guilt or shame, sometimes because we haven't really done anything productive. And so when we keep doing the same game over and over again, when it comes to online gaming, that's not necessarily a bad thing or an evil thing, but we almost never see a child's mental health improve because they found gaming as a way to become super duper happy. Even though if you look at other stress coping mechanisms that are much healthier, like playing outside, like having interaction and fellowship with others, those are things that have been scientifically proven to absolutely improve someone's mental health. And so that guilt and shame then eventually leads to more stress, which is what we call the addiction cycle, where we see people constantly pivot between those three topics.
So is that the stages of addiction, or are there more stages here where you get to, we did talk a little bit about desensitization and acting out, or is it basically kind of within these 3 points that you just described?
Right. So these are the three major points that from an addiction recovery professional, we would really look at and see like, hey, do we see these three parts? And then the work for us from a clinical perspective would start with starting treating that and trying to break the cycle. But in terms of the addiction getting worse, there are, of course, different stages. There's different levels of how addicted someone can be. One of the good things with online gaming specifically is that you can very clearly see in how much value a child is putting on online gaming on the moment that you ask them to switch it off. That's often a very common moment where you'll see some pushback. And how far is the pushback going to go? How unregulated do the emotions become? Because, of course, you might hear a little bit of a murmur or negotiating on, like, please, mom, 10 more minutes. That's quite normal. But on the moment a child is throwing a full tantrum because they cannot stick to their game, that is not a healthy thing. That is a moment where a parent should really step in and say, like, talk over with your spouse and be like, okay, how are we going to navigate this? And at least lessen the amount of time that they're spending behind their video games.
And that the same thing goes to any kind of screen, right? Because screen addiction in and of itself is a problem. So there's online gaming screens, there's social media screens, there's just smartphone screens,
Absolutely.
right? There's the laptop screen. And you take that away and you get a temper tantrum with a 2-year-old. You're going, hello,
Yeah.
we've got a
It
problem.
it can truly start that young. And that's why I know a lot of parents who have decided that their child should not interact with any screens until a later time, even though the temptation, even from a parental perspective, is really, really high to just have them watch something and turn something on. Right? Because you just need a quick moment to cook dinner or make something or do something. And that's just not always as effective. It actually, to protect your child's mental health, you really want to focus on making sure that they have other ways to entertain themselves rather than just a screen.
Just the screen. And thank you so much. We're going to come back after the break and we're going to talk about what are the healthy balances and how do you know when your child has a problem and what can you do to prevent these kinds of things. And if your child needs some type of professional counseling, how do you know that? What do you do? And where do you go to get help? So, Renz, thank you so much. And everyone else, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come right back in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back, everyone. This is Internet Safety, and I am Donna Rice Hughes, your host. And we have with us Renz DeKoning, who is a mental health expert who specializes in porn and sex addiction and other areas that I know a lot of you parents are going to want to hear about. And he's had a lot of experience both with parents and with kids. So, Renz, we talked about a lot in the beginning. And I want to come right into something that you call beeps. We were talking about addiction when we took the break. What is beeps? What does that stand for?
Yeah. So beeps are the five different categories of areas that anyone can be addicted to from a neurological perspectives. And so it's an acronym that stands for behaviors, events, experiences, people, and substances. And so these are the five areas. And usually when someone has an addiction. So, for example, a porn addiction would fall under behavioral. That's a behavioral addiction. Another example of that would be a gambling addiction or a gaming addiction. But even eating disorders, things like that would fall under the B. And for example, another example of a people would be codependency. Is an example of an addiction in that way. Substances is the most obvious one. That's the one that most people would know or recognize, right? If someone has an alcohol problem or a drug addiction or stuff like that, that would fall under the S. And so there are these five different categories. And usually what we would see is that someone is drawn to something like, for example, porn, and becomes addicted to that thing. And once that grows and once that develops and is left untreated, what would very frequently happen is that throughout over time, sometimes years, you would see that some other addictive behaviors would come in as well, because you're wiring your brain in such a way that you become much more prone to these other addictions as well, because you have what we would call an addictive mind right now. So in other words, a porn addiction can lead, for example, to a substance abuse addiction. And the chance that you will get one is much higher than if you were not addicted to porn, for example. So the idea or the notion that, for example, a behavioral addiction is not as bad, or just not a super bad thing as opposed to like alcoholism or drug addiction, that's not true, because they're very much part of the same clan in many different ways.
That's really interesting. You said once we've kind of had your brain wired for addiction, and I'm assuming this has to do with where there's a substance or there is something in there, in this addictive person or addictive substance or behavior that is then creating all these neurochemicals getting fired, right? That starts to create these neural pathways to lead us down this addictive pathway. Is that what happens? I know I said it in very layman's terms, but can you just expand on that just a little bit?
No, you're doing great on it. One of the big words that I always use to try to explain this process, because there's a lot of complicated medical mumbo jumbo there. One of the easiest ways to explain it is through joy. When we have a lack of joy, we are losing the ability to kind of balance out all of the, all of the different hormones, like stress hormones, like adrenaline or cortisol or anything that is causing us, that is the effect of undue stress. And so when we don't have enough joy, we find ourselves tempted to find that joy elsewhere. Now, our brain is so beautifully and wonderfully made that we can create our own dopamine, that we can actually do things that in fellowship with others, usually, that is causing us to actually have that reaction and provide for that dopamine and provide for real joy ourselves. However, when we feel not equipped for that, when we don't feel supported in that, we most likely we'll try to find that in external factors like the porn, like substance abuse, like any other addictive behavior. And so that will give us a dopamine release. And now instead of kind of making our own dopamine in a natural way, we are now going an unnatural way. And we now get stuck in something that is actually an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Oh, no, that was good. I was just thinking of some proverbs like a merry heart and laughter and singing and music and things that lift us up. And as I'm looking at this culture and everything that kids are being faced with, there's so many things that are creating these voids that may not have naturally been there before, the digital culture and everything else, because they're just being bombarded with so much. And it seems to me that we may be seeing kids younger and younger with wounds forming that may even make them more prone to getting their needs met in an unhealthy way or in an addictive way.
That's correct. And we already know from a scientific perspective that if a parent has an addictive past, that in terms of genetics, there is actually a higher chance that the child who has been exposed to addictive behavior will follow suit. And it also makes sense, right? Because if you have seen your parent model the behavior that if you're super stressed out and you have all this pressure in your life and you have all this hardship, that you just turn to fill in the blank, this or that, then that becomes your stress coping mechanism. And that's the thing that you don't want to teach. And so I think that the real answer, even more than like age restrictions on social media or anything else, is the strength of the family unit, the importance of a husband and a wife completely aligned with each other in terms of values, especially when they turn towards the kids, that they are a united front, and that you minimize screen time and actually maximize family time. We're talking about minimizing the screen time and the importance of regulating that in an effective way, which is super important in this day and age. But at the same time, you also have to focus on the joy side. That being part of a family is actually a joyous thing. And as these kids grow older and become teenagers, we all know it becomes harder and harder to have them be a part of that family unit. But that's why those foundational years are so critical, that they actually see the value of a strong family unit rather than the family unit having to compete with all of these screens.
Oh, that's just so good. And I hope parents are really listening to this. One of the things that I've said all along, that we've been doing this, we can't really teach a bad parent to become a good parent, but we can help good parents that care about and love their kids become good cyber parents, and just kind of the basics of the family unit, and turning off devices at dinner time and having these tech-free zones and this kind of thing, and really also focusing on face-to-face interaction with their friends and outdoor play and all these things. And I'm imagining that you're going to tell me that the science shows that outside and sunshine and running around and all these things are dopamine boosters, right?
Yes, ma'am. Well, absolutely. And I think that if we're being really honest with each other, did we really need the scientific studies for that? Like, isn't this also just plain logic? That if
Yes,
you're playing outside and you're learning how to be a part of society and sometimes meet other kids on the playground that have completely different values than yours, and learning how
exactly.
to deal with that is so different than if you're in a social media system where everything is about likes and validation, and where if you then post something that other people disagree with, that you should just become more and more angry and write even meaner and not okay statements, hurtful statements, just to get rid of your emotional rush. Like, this is clearly not okay. And as adults, I think we also can do a better job in modeling that behavior when it comes to adults being on social media.
Or just on our devices too much, right? Yeah, one of the things that I just, of course, we've seen this phenomenon. Anybody who's been out in public around kids, when they're sitting around in a group and they're not talking to each other, they're on their devices. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You know, calm down and interact. And
Right.
it's just so common sense, but
One of the
yeah.
very interesting things that we found in multiple studies is that when people make eye contact with each other, our brain actually registers whether that person is happy to see us or not, even before we realize what that person's name is. So imagine you going home this evening and you're seeing your husband, even before your brain registers and remembers your husband's name, you have already registered based on emotional and facial expressions and nonverbal behavior, whether that person is happy to see you or not. If that person is in a genuine relationship, um, the amazing thing is that that already causes a little dopamine release. And so that's such a beautiful reminder that even in the way that we are built and designed, we are made for relationship. We
Oh,
are made
yes.
for communication. We are made for fellowship with each other. And that's how we're designed. And so if we want to live the truest to our own selves, I think the biggest thing we can do, and it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, is to find that level of communication and those people around you that actually matter. And your kids are going to have to learn that too.
You're so right. One of my friends, one of her sayings is, and I think this makes a big difference. She says, if you see someone without a smile today, give them one of yours. And just
Oh, that's awesome.
smiling, even if you're not face to face, just when you smile and you're talking on the phone, you can feel it. You can hear that emotion. And Renz, I want to come into prevention, and then we're going to talk about treatment and recovery. Okay? So we've got a little bit of time left, maybe about 20 minutes. So let's just talk about prevention first of all. And I'm just going to tag on to the relationship in the family and the importance, parents, of not just showing, but telling your kids that you love them and that you're a safe person for them to come to and have an open communication really about everything in their life. Nothing is off limits. And in the online world, this is really important because we find so many kids just shut down if they start using pornography, or they feel like they might have an addiction somewhere, or they've interacted with a predator. Maybe they've even sent a nude picture of themselves because that's promoting shame and everything else. And the last thing they want to do is have the parents overreact, shame them, or take away their technology, right?
That's right. Yeah. Like I said previously in our talk, those three components of what makes an addictive behavior, that third part is the guilt and shame component. And what is, I think, really important for parents to understand is that when you kind of just make someone, a child, feel bad for doing something that is not good, and that is definitely an addictive behavior, there's a difference between teaching them that something is wrong and making them feel guilty or shameful about it. Because the second you do that, if you, and this is true, I think, for any human being, if you feel ashamed about something, you're less likely to share that with someone else, unless you fully trust that person and you kind of feel like that is a safe place. If you meet that behavior with punishment, what you're basically teaching the child is, please don't share this information with me. And that's about the worst thing that you could do. And so it is absolutely possible to teach your child to say, watching that is actually not okay. It's not good for your mental health. It has a lot of repercussions. It gives a lot of false ideas about what sex is and what that looks like. It creates all kinds of issues from a physiological point of view, from a mental point of view. And you can change that message to an age appropriate message without necessarily inserting a lot of guilt and shame in that. And so we don't have to normalize the behavior, but we do need to normalize the communication about it.
Right. And enough is enough. We will say things like, have regular conversations. If your kids are online every day, talk to them every day about who they're talking to and what they're doing, how something might have made them feel, what they're seeing that might have made them uncomfortable, etc. But you actually help parents in your treatment and in your counseling figure out how to have these conversations and what they should look like. Could you just give us a little snippet of just whatever comes to your mind that could be a takeaway for a parent going, how do I do this?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So one of the things that we really promote in families are family meetings. and having weekly meetings, in fact, where everyone kind of comes together, huddles around in a living room, and where you share highs and lows, very similar to some of the advice you were giving just before you asked this question, but to kind of make sure that we normalize having conversations with each other. And when you realize something is off, you don't want to create the same group mentality, especially if you have multiple children in the home. But you actually want to make sure that that child is kind of taken apart so that this moment can just be about that child. When you hear stories that shock you, that appall you, and unfortunately, we hear those stories all the time of information or things that are being shared or shown to children at an incredibly young age already at school. Um, and even on the playground for kids that are homeschooled, because believe me, just because your child is homeschooled does not mean that they're fully safe from all of these things.
No.
And so, one of the things to really understand there is to make sure that both in your verbal as well as your nonverbal communication, you stay away from the guilt and the shaming. That is so key, because you on without realizing it can actually contribute to the deepening and the worsening of addictive behavior, even though what you were trying to do is instill a sense of right and wrong in your child. So learning how to have that conversation is really important. And I would say on top of that, compliment a child for actually bringing this up to you as a parent. Actually saying, well done. This is exactly the kind of conversation I want to have with you, even if on a deep level, this conversation makes you so uncomfortable and you wish that you never had that conversation with your child. It is necessary because the world out there is normalizing all kinds of things to young children that should never, ever have been normalized.
That is so good, Rand. I just love that. That's just, I mean, this is it. There was research done many years ago, and they found that one of the best ways to prevent any type of online danger from becoming a real risk and a real harm is to have these kinds of conversations on a regular basis. Now, I do want to bring up tools because they're important on prevention. Then we're going to go to recovery. So just for you parents that may not know this, it's really important to use the parental control tools that are available to you to turn on the filters on your computers, smartphones, gaming devices, monitoring technology, and you can also set time limits. So these are tools that are there. They won't work if you don't use them because they are turned off. When you get your device, you've got to turn them on. And enough is enough. We're trying to get these defaults turned on so the parents don't have to do all this themselves. But we're not there yet. So that means parents, do these things, turn these tools on, make them work for you. And I'm just going to say one thing on screen time because we talked about this in the beginning. We're part of a national effort encouraging parents to wait till kids are in the 8th grade to ever give them a smartphone. So there's my 2 cents worth, Renz, but I want to come into recovery, right? Because a lot of parents are going, okay, this is all great, but I've already got a kid who's addicted to this or who's already demonstrating signs of gaming disorder or has been bullied or whatever. And so, Renz, can you talk about how does a parent know when it's time to seek professional help for their child?
Yes. So one of the things is that a lot of parents, when they were growing up, never were taught how to have these kinds of conversations, how to have these kind of healthy, messages sent out to their kids. I will say on that point too, just to revert back to what you were just saying about the parental controls, in between 80 to 90% of the kids that actually come in here for clinical treatment, we actually see that the kids were so smart that they were able to kind of get around the parental controls. And so there is this miscalculation with a lot of parents that they think that just because they installed the parental controls and they did turn them on, that means that their kids are now fully safe. That's not necessarily true. That doesn't mean that the parental controls are useless. I still highly recommend that you have them installed, but it just means that you still need to have those conversations that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. There is not a single parental control that will work better than you having that open dialogue with your child. And so it's really to look at that from a holistic point of view, and look at like you need and instead of an either or type of situation. So I just
Oh,
wanted to
yes.
highlight that real quick. And so your question was with regards to recovery, right? How that
Hmm.
when
But
you should
before
seek
you get
treatment.
to recovery, I just got to say something here. Um, we teach internet safety rules and tools. So, rules and tools, and these are for the parents. The rules are the non technical things you do, like building relationship, ongoing conversations, know what your kids are doing online, all those things that aren't technical. The tools are the other part. It's the yin and the yang, using the parental control tools because they both go together. And just on the parental control tools, one little thing on monitoring. This is why monitoring is really important,
Right.
because if your kid does get in, and they're probably, if they want to get something that you've blocked, they'll figure out how to get around it. Monitoring will help build accountability because of the way a monitoring tool works. Okay, so that's my 2 cents on that. So let's go to the recovery and the different
Yes.
sides of treatment. And we've
Yes.
got about 5 minutes, Renz, before we close.
I will do my very best. So, on the recovery side, what is the moment that you should revert out to a mental health professional? Well, any mental health professional that is trained in any area, whether it's a licensed counselor, whether it's an addiction recovery professional, everyone is always taught to kind of stay in the scope of their license. And that's a good thing to remember. And that's actually something that you can model as a parent too. How comfortable are you with these conversations? How well can you model certain behavior that your child can learn from? If you feel, based on your own trauma, based on your own experience, that this is something that you feel so out of your depth, you've had multiple conversations with your child is not changing any of the behaviors, and no matter how much screen time you take away or you take the laptop away, they still find different ways of watching porn or watching inappropriate content, and they seem to really show that they're not able to control it, whether they admit it or not. That would be a really important moment to say, I need more help with this. That doesn't mean, and I really want to make that really clear to your audience, that does not mean that you are failing as a parent. On the moment that you need more help because this is not something that you have studied through and through, that
Right.
does not mean that you're failing as a parent. When you're not getting the help, when you know that they need the help and you just keep having the same conversations and the behaviors is just getting worse and worse and worse and it's not getting any better and you don't get them any help, that's what I would say is when you're failing at parenting, not not the other way around. So I actually see it as a form of strength. And
Yeah.
you'll see that once you vet your mental health professionals by asking them all kinds of good questions about their stands and what their modalities are, how are they going to approach this issue, and you feel like you can really trust them, you'll notice that the good clinicians out there, especially on the addiction side, will always include the parent. That's one very big thing that you can see amongst mental health professionals that do a good job. They will always have a sense of parent coaching. Well, they'll teach you, hey, these are the type of conversations I've had with your child. They may not share every detail, not because they want to keep a secrets from you, but because they want to win the trust from the
The
child so that they
child.
tell them
Right.
everything so we can treat them. But there's always this moment in time where we will pivot and we'll position the parents in a place of success so that the parent can take over once treatment is complete.
I love this, friends, and I just love the fact that that at Genesis Foundation you actually can provide telehealth, right? So you don't have to live in your town to get the benefit of your counseling and all the people on your team, your wife, and everyone else. So let our listeners know we've got less than 2 minutes, all right? Where they can go to get help, how to reach you, how to contact you.
Yes. So we are a biblically based mental health organization. We do a lot more than just addictions. We do marriage counseling, individually therapy, trauma informed care. We do, and of course, addiction recovery, including these behavioral addictions like we talked about today. We offer free 15-minute consultations. So if anyone ever just needs a quick conversation with a mental health professional, one of the people in our team, we're always happy to kind of see whether we're the right fit. You can go to our website, genesis-family.com, to basically sign up for a free 15-minute consultation, and we will always aim to get back to you within 48 hours.
Oh, Renz, this is so great. This has just been a wonderful show, and I just want to thank you for joining us, sharing your expertise, and I want to thank all the listeners out there. Please share this podcast if you found that it was helpful and beneficial to you. Go to our website at internetsafety101.org, and until next time, God bless y'all.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Internet Safety with Donna Rice Hughes, designed to educate, equip, and empower you to keep your children and family safe in the digital world. Until we talk again, have a beautiful and safe week.